What's up guys, Mike here. The Detroit Borg, and Apple has finally released a product red version of its iPhones. So midway through the life cycle of the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, we get this brand new color. We've seen this color before on iPods and accessories, but we finally get it on the iPhone. Now very similar to jet black, this is only available in the two larger capacities, 128 or 256 gigs. So that means you do have to pay a bit more to get this phone because you can't get the 32 gig model. And of course we have both models to take a look at, so let's get to the unboxing. Now I'm going to start off with the 7 Plus because that's my daily driver, and they make it very easy to unwrap this. Just pull the tab, remove the plastic, and we're ready to go ahead and lift up the lid. So lifting up the lid, the first thing you see here won't be the phone, but the paperwork. So the paperwork in this case has been tweaked for this specific model, and that's because this is a product red cause, meaning that a portion of the profit from this phone goes to the product red cause. And you can find out more by going to the link. Besides that, we have some pretty familiar paperwork, a quick start guide highlighting the main buttons and features of the phone, along with a SIM ejection tool. And I get this because I have a SIM unlocked phone, so there's no SIM in this phone, so at least I get a tool to install my own. Of course, we get some warranty and regulatory information along with some Apple stickers. Unfortunately, they're not red. That would have been fantastic. They're just white and they come on this clear sheet just like the other iPhone 7 and 7 Pluses. So once we get all of that out of the way, we can get to the phone itself. Now, at first glance, it actually looks like a silver phone. That's because we have a white front and a silver Touch ID ring. But as soon as you flip it over, you get this very stunning, vibrant red color. So the more light you have on this, the more it glows. It really is stunning in person. So we can go ahead and peel off the plastic to reveal the final finish. So this is the matte finish, very similar to the other iPhones, that anodized aluminum finish. This is not like the jet black glossy finish, so it should be pretty durable. The other thing you might notice right away is that the inset Apple logo is silver instead of a matching color or matching tone as we see with the other iPhones. So really the theme here is white, silver, and red. But unlike the other phones with a white bezel, the antenna lines are matched to the color of the chassis. So setting that aside really quickly, let's get to the accessories, which are all pretty familiar. We get a 5-watt power adapter along with a set of ear pods. Also included on the back is a lightning to headphone adapter in case you forgot that this does not have a headphone jack. And lastly, very compactly tied up here is the lightning cable for charging the phone. Next up, let's dig into the 4.7-inch iPhone 7. So the packaging here is identical, it's just shrunken down to size. So I'm going to make this fairly quick. We're going to unwrap the box, lift up the lid, and we'll find very similar paperwork. And underneath that, we have the iPhone 7 wrapped in plastic. Unwrapping that looks just as stunning as the 7 Plus. And of course, in the box, we get all of the same accessories, just more tightly packaged. So putting these phones up for the first time, you can see the boot screen is white to reflect the white bezel. So it's not red or some other funky color here. It just reflects the color of the bezel, just like the other iPhones. In terms of software and features, there really is no difference between this and the other iPhone 7s. So if you want to see more detail about the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, I'll leave my video linked below so you can check it out. In terms of this color, it's really impressive. Now this is an anodized aluminum finish, so that texture sort of reflects the color a bit differently depending on the angle or source of the light. So there is quite a bit of depth to it, and the more light you have on this, the better. So it really is kind of like a candy apple or metallic red on a car. It really shows off the curves, and I like how it plays with the light. Now one of the details I really like about this design and color is the polished Apple logo. Not only does it stand out a bit more, but it also contrasts nicely with a deeper matte red finish. So that glossy finish, that mirror finish, looks really impressive against this surface. Of course, this is a product red phone, so you'll find the product red branding just below the iPhone text. So taking a close look at those details, the buttons along the side are color matched to the phone. So of course, we have the power button along the right and the volume controls along the left, along with our mute switch. And as you can see, something a bit different here. Instead of an orange stripe for the mute switch, we get a white stripe. That's to contrast with the red color. So along the bottom edge, we'll find the speaker, the microphone, along with a lightning connector and the screws. And they kind of pop out here because they're silver instead of matched to the color of the body like they are on some of the other iPhones. So they don't completely match the color here. You can see the speaker grills are black instead of red. So those details have been missed in this case. I'm not sure why, but it does work with the design, I think, because we have those silver accents on the front and back. And as always, the nano SIM tray is color matched to the body of the phone. There's also a gasket to keep water out. Something I'm noticing for the first time with this one is the patterns or dots at the end of it. I'm not sure what that is. If you know, let me know in the comment section below. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is not the first time we've seen this product red design. It's exactly identical to that of the iPod Touch product red, including these silver accents and white bezel. Now, I have noticed that the product red on the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus is a bit deeper than the product red color on the iPod Touch. So it seems to be a bit redder, a bit darker compared to the more orangey red of the iPod Touch, at least compared to the iPhone 7 Plus, but you do need quite a bit of light to see the difference. Now, a lot of people wanted a black bezel, and I think that would look great with a red phone, but it's also kind of intense. So I mean that red and black is a little more sinister. I don't think Apple particularly liked that look, and that's why you don't see it with the iPod Touch, the iPod Nano, and finally the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. This was also the same case with the gold iPhone. A lot of people wanted the black bezel. Instead, we got the white bezel. I still think that was the right decision. But for me, I definitely like the white and red and have no complaints that it's not black. Now, in terms of what my favorite color is, I still think jet black is my favorite overall, and that's because of that glossy finish. I love the way it works with the design of the iPhone. Everything else contrasts more with the surfaces and textures and colors, but in the end, this product red version is going to be my daily driver until they release the next iPhone, although I'm probably just going to cover it with a case anyway. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this look at the new product red iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up to let me know, and I'll see you again in the next video.
Hey, what is up guys, I'm MKBHD here, and this is the newest iPhone. It's a couple months later, and this is the review. So believe it or not, this phone is about 4 months old already, which means a lot of you considering buying one have already made up your mind on that, but you definitely learn a lot from using a phone for a longer period of time. 4 months isn't even that long, it's just longer than I usually take to review things. But for me, at least, with 4 months, the honeymoon period is over. It's not brand new and shiny anymore. You got your fingerprints on it, you got your scratches on it, you've used it every day, and you really get to know it best. So first and foremost, even though this is the iPhone 7, even though this is supposed to be the bigger step forward in the tick-tock of Apple releases, 6, 6S, 7, 7S, this is still definitely a very familiar and very incremental upgrade to the previous iPhone again. It's a familiar iPhone. Same rectangle with the rounded corners for the design, same big forehead and chin with the home button, same seamless unibody metal industrial design again, and same scrolling pages of icons for iOS. So at its core, it's super easy to get used to, especially when you're coming from another iPhone just to pick up an iPhone 7. But that being said, there are plenty of little things and plenty of refinements that all add up to make a much better phone than you had last year. So on the outside, the improvements are more minor. A little design tweak from last year. The antenna bands are gone, and the back looks a little bit cleaner. But it's definitely still an iPhone, there's no mistaking that, so if you want to mess with the design a little bit more, you can maybe put a skin on it like I showed in my daily driver video. But this design, as stale as it may seem, is iconic and very familiar. So we still have some of the biggest bezels in any smartphone. That is a bit annoying when you have the white bezels, but that's so you can still have this home button for at least 1 more year. And speaking of the home button, it's now not a physical button anymore, but it's more of like a force touch trackpad. It doesn't actually move, it's just a still piece of glass, but it's pressure sensitive. So when you press it, it works and the taptic motor makes a click and it makes it feel like you're pressing a button. And it's really convincing, I'd say. It's really easy to get used to. It used to be weird when you're like pushing it on a table and it doesn't really work with gloves, but I'm 100% used to it now. I'm actually totally cool with this home button. I should also mention, I think Touch ID is at the holy grail where it's like a no-brainer whether you should use it or not. You set it up once, right when you get your phone, and it's faster and more secure than typing in a password every single time. So I like Touch ID a lot. Anyway, aside from just the home button, this is the 2nd generation of the iPhone with 3D Touch, but I don't really use it that much. I mean, it's definitely built into more apps and there's shortcuts on the home screens and even in the apps themselves, but yeah, I just don't really use it that much. One thing I do have to say though is something the iPhone doesn't get enough credit for. The iPhone has the best vibration motor in any smartphone, period. And I'm talking about the Taptic engine. Like, this phone literally feels like it's tapping you on the wrist or in your pocket or in your hand when you get a notification. It's awesome, so I love the Taptic engine, it's really good, and Apple clearly knows this because they're using it in way more parts of iOS animations now. So like the notification shade bouncing off the bottom of the screen, that type of thing, or control center bouncing up, or really just any bouncing anywhere in iOS. It always clicks so the phone feels like it's bouncing. Anyway, one of the biggest changes on the outside is it's now officially a waterproof phone. So the iPhone 7 is IP67 rated, which means you don't have to worry about dropping it in or near water anymore, and you can just take underwater photos and videos if you want. Basically, the phone should survive water exposure now. But other than that, you know, the displays on the iPhone 7 are still pretty good, you know, nothing crazy or amazing, still has great color reproduction. But the one thing that's killing me, and it's not just me, it's tons of people obviously, about the outside of the phone is the lack of a headphone jack. Basically, Apple is clearly aiming for an entirely portless, wireless iPhone in their future. So in that process, they're removing the headphone jack and starting to push wireless audio. Super aggressive? Yes. Super forward-thinking? Yes. Super a pain in the ass? Also yes. I mean, I'm probably going to make a whole video on the whole wireless phone thing. Maybe let me know if you'd want that in the comments section. Now, the camera on the iPhone 7 is new too. You can see the different housing. There's a new sensor and new glass, and you might remember from the Smartphone Awards, this camera is already one of the best. It takes great photos and great 4K videos. I think it might get the title of best low-light photo camera back. It was kind of close with Samsung, but the image processing from Apple has always been excellent. Autofocus is also extremely fast, and daytime photos look pretty damn good too, but it's by far the best video camera in any smartphone. I'll tell you that right now. I'll link below the video I shot entirely on this camera, but seriously, the 4K video from this sensor with the optical image stabilization and the big wide open aperture, honestly, sometimes you can't tell the difference from like a real dedicated mirrorless camera's footage. It's that good. Get a little depth of field going. I mean, it's awesome. Everything's there. Now, the iPhone 7 Plus has a second camera lens, as you already saw in my daily driver video. One regular camera, same as the smaller phone, and one telephoto lens at twice the focal length for that 2x optical zoom. And it's really interesting the way it works, but I think it turned out to be one of Apple's coolest products of 2016 last year. Basically, when you're all the way zoomed out, you're not just getting data from the main camera, as you would expect, but it's also actually intelligently using some imagery stitching in from the telephoto camera as well to make it a little bit sharper and a little bit more detailed in the center of the frame. Now, sometimes it uses lots of that data, sometimes none at all. Like if you accidentally cover the telephoto lens with your finger, for example, it doesn't use anything from it. But when you start to zoom in a bit, it continuously, intelligently analyzes how much of the information to stitch in, and then you can actually see it completely switch over cameras when you get to 2x zoom. It's subtle, but the tiny change in exposure is there, you can see it, and from what I've seen, it actively does this switching during video recording too. So dual cameras is pretty awesome and it works really well. You can only get it obviously on the bigger iPhone, which is why I guess a lot of people don't get to play with it, but through software updates, stuff like portrait mode is getting better every day, and basically if you're into photography or videography, the iPhone 7 Plus is the phone to get. Now on the inside, basically all you need to know that's changed is the chip. The A10 Fusion chip is fantastic in this phone, and I'm pretty comfortable calling this the most responsive phone ever. Like, this is something Apple does really well since they control both all the hardware and all the software. So no phone is as smooth and as one-to-one responsive to the touch of your finger as a fresh iPhone. I'd say the Google Pixel comes closest right now, and then maybe the OnePlus 3T right after that, and generally stock Android phones, but the smoothness and high frame rates of animations are the most consistent on the iPhone 7, and that's something I really like, and it's something you'll appreciate like every single day you're using the phone. Overall performance is awesome through multitasking and everyday use and gaming and navigation and all kinds of stuff, and the battery life to go with that is also about the same as last year, which is to say pretty good, but not great. So the iPhone 7 has an okay battery and decent standby time, while the bigger iPhone 7 Plus that I'd recommend has pretty good battery with excellent standby time. Also, fun fact, this year Apple made the iPhone the same dimensions and included a bigger battery instead of making it smaller with the same size battery. Thank you, Apple. keep doing that, please. I really don't need it to be thinner. But that is pretty much what's good with the new iPhone. Lots of little upsides, lots of little improvements with the hardware on the outside and on the inside. My biggest complaints would be that they went with Lightning over USB Type-C again, although I would totally expect them to keep doing that, and that they went with no headphone jack instead of a headphone jack. Obviously, I can't tell you how many Uber drivers have offered me the aux cable and I have to turn down the jams. So at the end of the day, iPhone 7 has a lot that's new with it, but obviously it's still a very familiar incremental upgrade, just like previous iPhones have been. And that's kind of the point. That's why people keep getting iPhones. That's not a bad thing. That's a great reason to buy this phone again, especially if you're coming from a previous gen. But I think that this year, you're gonna see a lot more big improvements with the 10th generation iPhone, or the iPhone 7S, or the iPhone X. Whatever they end up calling it, that's the one I'm most excited for. Until then, that's been it. Thank you for watching, and talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
The desire to own the latest and greatest smartphone is an understandable one. Even if you've been carrying a smartphone since the days they were just PDAs with cellular connectivity, there's still a thrill to coming home with the latest hardware, armed with blistering fast performance, the hottest new features, and featuring a sleek futuristic design. For Apple fans, this is the time of year to go shopping for a new iPhone, but this year the question of which model to go with is trickier than ever. Do you go with a standard iPhone 7 with its 12-megapixel camera, a very respectable camera with an f1.8 aperture and extended color range, or do you double down on image-taking hardware with the new iPhone 7 Plus and its all-new dual camera arrangement? Do two cameras mean pictures that look twice as good? And what about those other iPhone 7 Plus enhancements, like the extra RAM and extended battery? Did they add up to making the 7 Plus this year's must-have upgrade? I'm Stephen Shank with Phone Arena, and you're watching my full review of the Apple iPhone 7 Plus. The iPhone 7 is a handset that's all about refinement, taking the familiar look of the 6 and the 6S, streamlining that design with a new solid-state home button, fading into the background antenna lines, and a long overdue dose of water-resistant construction. It's very much a derivative phone, and that's great because Apple's really nailing what's working for it, while also not being afraid to tweak a few things here and there in the aim of perfection, even if that includes the controversial move to drop the familiar headphone jack. And while the iPhone 7 Plus builds off those same choices that brought us the iPhone 7, it pushes out on its own in a way we haven't quite seen from a Plus model before, really emphasizing that this isn't just about big iPhones and little iPhones, but about the user experience these two ultimately distinct phones can offer. And a whole lot of that has to do with the fancy new dual rear camera on the 7 Plus. Before we dive full into a look at that new camera hardware, let's step back for a broader overview of the new plus-sized iPhone. The iPhone 7 Plus comes in with the very same footprint as the iPhone 6S Plus. Button placement remains consistent, but if you look closely you can already spot some of the ways Apple's been refining its design, like removing the shallow cutout between volume keys. While button placement may be the same, the hardware itself is evolving, and the biggest difference here is the presence of a new home button. It's still got Touch ID, which continues to make authentication quick and painless, but now it's no longer a physical button that moves and clicks when you press it. Instead, the new solid-state component responds to finger pressure in much the same way as the screen's 3D touch system, and the phone's Taptic engine recognizes a firm button press with an emulated click of its own. It doesn't feel quite right at first, but the illusion quickly overtakes you, and you'll forget the button isn't really clicking at all in no time. Continuing our tour around the phone's body, we see that big new camera bulge around back, housing the pair of 12-megapixel shooters and flanked by the upgraded quad LED flash. And while that stretched out camera bump may be the most attention-getting component of the phone's backside, we're also very interested in what our eyes aren't drawn to, namely the tucked-away antenna stripes. They're more visible on other iPhone 7 Plus color options, but with this black palette, they practically fade into nothingness, and that makes for a really nice, clean look. Finally, we can't ignore what's happening down south, and it wouldn't be an iPhone 7 Plus discussion without talking about Apple's decision to remove its phone's analog headphone jack. Instead, users now have to make a choice. Go with new headphones that connect over Lightning cables, like the pair of new EarPods that ship with the smartphone, carry around the included Lightning to analog adapter Apple provides and keep on rocking your old pair of headphones, or just go full-on wireless with a Bluetooth pair, maybe like the soon-to-land Apple AirPods. Doing away with ports may seem like moving backwards to some of you, but it definitely makes one job much easier for Apple, sealing off one point of entry as the manufacturer brings us its first ever, formally water-resistant iPhones. Like the iPhone 7 and new Apple Watch, the iPhone 7 Plus offers water and dust resistance. You probably won't want to try using it while scuba diving, but Apple's hardened the phone's body against the threat of water penetration from things like casual splashes, sprays, and even a not too deep drop underwater. While all this hardware comes together in a package that's the same basic size as last year's iPhone Plus, Apple still managed to shave a few grams off its weight, giving us the lightest Plus model since the original 6. With everything staying the same size, it shouldn't be a shock to learn that Apple's brought us another Plus phone with a 5.5-inch display. Resolution stays at 1080 by 1920, but Apple brings the panel the same sort of upgrades also picked up by the iPhone 7, higher brightness and increased color range. In its official docs, Apple claims that both the 7 and 7 Plus should share the same brighter screen tech, but in our test, the Plus actually came out significantly ahead, with the display much brighter than even Apple advertised, and hey, who doesn't love it when a company underpromises and overdelivers? But while the iPhone 7 Plus may compare favorably to other iPhones, there are lots of other 5.5-inch handsets out there, and Apple's model, though sleek enough on its own, can seem positively bulky when placed head-to-head with a more petite 5.5-incher, like Samsung's Galaxy S7 Edge. After upgrading our existing iPhones and iPads, to say nothing of spending some time with the smaller iPhone 7, we're intimately familiar with iOS 10 by now, and its execution on the iPhone 7 Plus doesn't really offer any new twists. That shouldn't sound like a complaint though, as iOS 10 brings a lot to the table that we really like, from the tricked out new look of messages with stickers and emoji galore to the convenience of rise to wake and a widget-enhanced lock screen. While you can get access to iOS 10 on any number of Apple devices, the iPhone 7 Plus manages to bring users one of the smoothest implementations of it yet, thanks to the power of the phone's new A10 Fusion chip and the most RAM we've ever seen on an Apple smartphone. In our battery of benchmark tests, the iPhone 7 Plus and iPhone 7, also packing that same A10 Fusion processor, went head-to-head for the top spot. Sometimes the Plus took the honor, while other times the 7 itself pulled ahead, possibly due to reduced rendering requirements of the lower-res screen. But not only does the 7 Plus offer this kind of great performance, but it also features 3GB of RAM to the 7's 2GB, helping to prepare this handset for dealing with particularly demanding apps, or just a lot of regular ones. Speaking of apps, you're going to have plenty of room for them thanks to the new base level of 32GB of storage for this year's iPhones, the 7 Plus included. While the days of 16GB have long been numbered, it was especially frustrating to see such paltry storage on this top-shelf phablet, so we're glad to finally see it go. And as 16GB retires, Apple hooks us up with a new high-end storage option, providing a 256GB model for users who simply can't get enough space. Just like with the iPhone 7, the 128GB and 256GB storage tiers are also connected to Apple's limited availability jet black color option. You won't find any 32GB jet black iPhone 7 Plus. In addition to glossy jet black, the iPhone 7's color options are joined by the matte black you see here, as well as the return of silver, gold, and rose gold. The big story with multimedia this year may be the iPhone losing its headphone jack, but we do gain something in the process, as the iPhone 7 Plus picks up a pair of stereo speakers. The bottom-mounted component we're familiar with from years past is now joined by a speaker in the phone's earpiece, and the pair of them together sounds pretty good. Like with the iPhone 7 though, we've noticed how the ear speaker is a lot lighter on the base than the bottom edge component, making things sound a little unbalanced at times. But at least it's really loud, and combined with the big 5.5-inch screen, that makes the iPhone 7 Plus a good phone for sharing video with friends. Okay, we've been taking our time getting here, but how about that camera? Apple doubles up on its camera tech with the iPhone 7 Plus, pairing the wide-angle 12-megapixel camera from the iPhone 7, with its bright f1.8 aperture, with a second 12-megapixel camera, this one equipped with an f2.8 telephoto lens. While that arrangement sounds like one that could make photo taking unnecessarily complicated, Apple's software makes dealing with the pair a breeze. Just keep the camera in 1x mode for wide shots, and tap the button once for an effortless 2x zoom. That's it. Switching back and forth is painless, with no worries about long waits while refocusing. And if you really do want to push limits, digital zoom extends to an admittedly noisy 10x. Just like dual-camera smartphones on Android, Apple's not above using the iPhone 7 Plus's pair to pull off some neat shooting effects, promising a cool controlled blur bokeh portrait mode. Unfortunately, that one's not ready just yet, or at least it's only available in beta. That's an odd move for Apple to launch hardware like this without all the software ready, but we're still eager to give it a shot once it arrives. Video performance on the iPhone 7 Plus is as smooth and crisp as we'd expect from our experience with the iPhone 7, but the availability of zoom adds a great new twist to its execution. You can jump in and out of zoom without taking a break from filming, making sure you don't miss any important moments. All this new hardware demands a lot of electricity, and Apple responds by upping battery size from last year, giving the iPhone 7 Plus a 2900 mAh component. That's around 5% larger than the 6S Plus had. Sadly, that doesn't translate into a similar gain in battery life, and our testing showed the 7 Plus coming in at just about the same time as the 6 Plus, even a few minutes shorter actually. Still, with a brighter screen, faster processor, more RAM, and an extra camera, things could be a lot worse, and admittedly, we're resigned to be happy just not seeing a bigger loss. With the new iPhone 7 Plus, Apple's given us one of the most compelling reasons yet to say goodbye to smaller iPhones and embrace the Plus for all of its extras. Battery life adds an hour and a half over what you get with the iPhone 7, extra RAM gives software room to grow, and maybe more than anything, the 2x zoom on the new dual camera's telephoto lens will change the way you take pics and shoot video, very much for the better. Still, Apple's 5.5-inch handset is starting to feel a little bit on the large side. While we appreciate the desire to return to a familiar design, maybe it's time to start tightening up those bezels and shrinking the overall build a little. Still, if you don't mind the size, this is the iPhone to get. Well worth the price of admission, even as we wait for some new features to arrive via software update. If not, the iPhone 7 still won't steer you wrong, and who knows, maybe next year the 7S will inherit the dual camera from the Plus, giving us the best of both worlds. For now though, I'm Stephen Shank with Phone Arena. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming coverage, including Apple Watch Series 2.